The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 1,000 species had gathered to witness this moment, their countless eyes fixed upon the lone figure standing before the massive viewing screen. Kiraveth felt every single gaze upon her skin like needles of Eistad. She was beautiful by any standard in the galaxy. Her skin shimmered with a pale blue light, and her eyes were pools of liquid silver that could see into the souls of lesser beings. Her people, the Silthani, were among the oldest races in known space. They had built empires when humans were still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks. And now, she was to marry one of those rock-throwers. The High Matriarch. Her mother had explained it with cold precision. The war with humanity had lasted 10 years. It had cost the Silthani Dominion 40 billion lives, 300 star systems, and their pride. The humans, those impossible, stubborn, terrifying creatures, had refused to die. Every time the Silthani thought they had won, the humans found a new way to fight back. They were like a disease that could not be cured. So the Dominion had sued for peace. And the price of that peace was standing right here, wearing ceremonial robes that felt like chains. Kiraveth would marry Commander Marcus Cole of the United Earth Navy. She would become his wife, his property under human law, a living symbol of Silthani submission. Her children, if she was forced to bear any, would be half-breeds. Her name would become a curse among her own people. The viewing screen flickered to life, and she saw his face for the first time. Marcus Cole was not what she expected. The propaganda videos had shown him as a demon with fire in his eyes, laughing as Silthani ships burned around him. The man on the screen was simply tired. He had dark hair with streaks of gray at the temples, and his eyes were the color of a stormy ocean. There were lines on his face that spoke of years without proper sleep. He looked like a man who had seen too much death and found no joy in it. "The Butcher of Nexion Prime," whispered someone in the crowd behind her. Kiraveth felt her blood freeze. Nexion Prime. 4 million of her people, civilians all, dead in a single day. Women, children, elderly, the sick, and the helpless. All gone in nuclear fire because this man had given an order, and she was expected to share his bed. The ceremony was mercifully brief. Words were spoken in 12 languages. Treaties were signed by holographic projection. When it was done, Kiraveth was no longer just a princess of the Silthani Dominion. She was also, impossibly, a wife to a human. A shuttle carried her to the human vessel waiting in orbit. It was called the UEN's Constellation, and it was massive, ugly, and bristling with weapons. Everything about it screamed aggression. Everything about it was human. She was met at the airlock by an honor guard of human soldiers. They stood perfectly still, their faces hidden behind helmets, their weapons gleaming under the harsh lights. Kiraveth walked between them with her head held high, refusing to show fear. The corridors of the ship were cold and gray. There were no decorations, no beauty, nothing to please the eye. Just metal and function, and the distant hum of engines that could destroy worlds. Kiraveth felt like she was walking into a prison. And then she saw him. Marcus Cole was waiting for her at the end of the corridor. He was taller than she expected, and broader. Humans were built for violence in a way that most species were not. Their muscles were dense, their bones thick, their bodies capable of surviving damage that would kill any Silthani. Looking at him, Kiraveth understood for the first time why her people had lost the war. But what surprised her most was what he did next. Marcus Cole bowed. Not a human bow, quick and shallow, but a proper Silthani bow. He placed his right hand over his heart, then at the waist until his head was lower than hers, and held the position for exactly 3 heartbeats. It was a bow of respect from a lower-ranked person to a higher-ranked one. It was a bow that said, "I honor you." No human should have known that gesture. It took years of study to understand Silthani customs. Either this man had been preparing for this meeting for a very long time, or he had teachers that no one knew about. When he straightened, his eyes met hers. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in them more clearly. This was a man who was barely holding himself together. "Lady Kiroveth," he said. His voice was deep but soft. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you have every reason to hate me. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." She did not know what to say. She had prepared herself for cruelty, for demands, for the arrogance that all Silthani believed was natural to humans. She had not prepared for an apology. "Your quarters are ready," Marcus continued. "They're the best I could manage. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you can ask Lieutenant Chun. She speaks fluent Silthani and has been assigned to help you adjust." He paused, and something painful crossed his face. I won't come to your quarters unless you invite me. The treaty gives me certain rights, but I have no intention of using them. You're not my prisoner, Lady Kiroveth. You're not my property. As far as I'm concerned, you're a guest on this ship, and I'll do everything in my power to make your life here bearable. Kiroveth stared at him. Her telepathic abilities, which could read most alien minds like open books, found only static when she tried to touch his thoughts. Humans were strangely resistant to mental intrusion. But in that static, she caught glimpses of something. Sorrow, guilt, a desperate hope that she might not hate him forever, that it made no sense. Nothing about this man matched what she had been told. Why? She asked. It was the only word she could manage. Marcus Cole smiled, but there was no happiness in it. Because I've done enough harm for one lifetime, Lady Kiroveth. Because I don't want to add another crime to my list. Because you deserve better than what the galaxy has given you. He bowed again, that perfect Silthani bow, and then he turned and walked away. His shoulders were bent like a man carrying an invisible weight. Kiroveth watched him go. And for the first time since the treaty was announced, she felt something other than fear and hatred. She felt confused. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. The months that followed changed everything. It started slowly, carefully, like two wounded animals learning to trust each other. Kiroveth began leaving her quarters more often. She walked the corridors of the constellation, learning its layout, meeting its crew. The humans were strange to her, loud and emotional in ways that made her uncomfortable. But they were also surprisingly kind. They made space for her in their conversations. They asked about Silthani customs with genuine curiosity. They did not treat her like a prisoner or a trophy. And always, there was Marcus. He joined her for meals when his duties allowed. They talked about small things at first, safe things. Food, music, the differences between their peoples. He made her laugh once, and the sound surprised her so much that she fell silent for 10 full minutes. But eventually, they began to talk about harder things. "Tell me about Nexion Prime," Kiroveth said one evening. They were in the observation deck again, their usual spot. Outside the window, a nebula painted the darkness in shades of purple and gold. The truth, not the propaganda. I need to understand. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Nexion Prime was a civilian station. 4 million people lived there. Families, children, elderly. It was supposed to be safe from the war. He closed his eyes. But your military built a shipyard in its center. They were constructing a weapon there, something called the Sunbreaker. It was designed to destroy stars. One shot could kill an entire solar system. Kiroveth felt cold. She had never heard of the Sunbreaker. Either it was highly classified or Marcus was lying. Looking at his face, she did not think he was lying. Intelligence told us the weapon would be ready in 3 weeks, Marcus continued. The first target was Earth's sun. 12 billion people would die. Every human being on our homeworld, gone in an instant. He opened his eyes and looked at her, and she saw the horror of that moment reflected in them. I tried everything else first. We sent diplomats. They were killed. We attempted surgical strikes on the shipyard, but it was too well protected. We tried to evacuate the civilians, but your military refused. They knew we wouldn't fire if innocent people were in the way. But you did fire, Kiraveth said softly. Yes, the word was barely a whisper. I gave the order. I murdered 4 million people to save 12 billion. And the worst part is, I would do it again. I hate myself for it, but I would do it again, because the alternative was extinction. Kiraveth sat with that for a while. The mathematics were horrible, but clear. 4 million against 12 billion. 1 in 3,000. Any rational being would make the same choice. But Marcus was not treating it as a rational choice. He was treating it as a crime. I requested access to your ship's archives, she said. You gave it to me without restriction. I read the records of the Nexion Prime operation. Marcus tensed. All of them? All of them. Kiraveth turned to face him fully. I read about the 17 diplomatic missions you attempted. I read about the 3 rescue operations you launched to evacuate civilians, 2 of which cost you ships and crew. I read about the 12-hour window you gave before the final strike, hoping someone would surrender or flee. She paused. I also read what happened after. You submitted yourself for judgment. When they called you a hero, you refused every honor. You asked to be punished, and they gave you this assignment instead. Marcus said nothing. His hands were shaking. You are not what I expected, Kiraveth said. I was prepared for a monster. I found a man who carries the weight of the dead on his shoulders every single day. A man who hates his own survival. I don't deserve to survive, Marcus said quietly. Those 4 million people didn't get a choice. Why should I? Kiraveth reached out and touched his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly since the marriage ceremony. His skin was warm, warmer than hers, and she could feel his pulse jumping beneath her fingers. Perhaps, she said, that is exactly why you should survive. The ones who care about the cost, the ones who remember the names, they are the ones who should be trusted with power, not the ones who feel nothing. Marcus looked at their joined hands like he could not believe it was real. I asked for this assignment, he admitted. This marriage. Everyone else saw it as a punishment, a humiliation for the great war hero. But I asked for it. Why? Because I thought maybe, if I could make one Silthani life better, it might start to balance the scales. Not forgiveness, I know I can never earn that. But maybe, just maybe, I could do something good for once. He swallowed hard. I thought if I could make you happy, even a little bit, it might mean something. Kiraveth felt her heart do something strange. It took her a moment to recognize the sensation. It was warmth. You are a strange creature, Marcus Cole, she said. Your people conquered half the galaxy in 300 years. You fight like demons, and you refuse to accept defeat. And yet here you are, trembling because I touched your hand. Humans are complicated, he said with a shaky smile. We contain contradictions. Yes, Kiraveth agreed. I am beginning to see that. She did not pull her hand away. They sat together in the starlight, and for the first time since her marriage, Kiraveth did not feel like a prisoner. She felt like she might be exactly where she was supposed to be. Later that night, alone in her quarters, she realized something that shocked her. She was looking forward to seeing Marcus again tomorrow. She was actually looking forward to it. The butcher of Nexion Prime, the monster of her nightmares, had somehow become the only person in the galaxy she wanted to talk to. Kiraveth did not know what to do with that realization. So she picked up one of his books and started reading. And she tried not to think about the way her hearts had raced when he smiled at her. She failed completely. 3 weeks passed aboard the Constellation, and Marcus Cole did not visit her once. Kiraveth had expected him every night. She had lain awake in the darkness, her heart's pounding, waiting for the door to open. She had prepared herself for the worst. She had rehearsed the cold silence she would maintain, the wall of ice she would build around her soul to survive whatever he did to her. But the door never opened. Instead, gifts arrived. Strange gifts. Human gifts. The first was a collection of books, thousands of them, all translated into the Sylphanish script. They appeared on a reading device left outside her door with a simple note. "I thought you might be bored. These are some of my favorites." Kiraveth had ignored them for 2 days. Then boredom won. The books were unlike anything she had ever read. Sylphani literature was formal, ancient, full of correct behavior and proper relationships. Human literature was chaos. It was full of passion and pain, and people making terrible decisions for love. The humans wrote about war not as glory but as tragedy. They wrote about heroes who were flawed and villains who thought they were right. One story captured her attention more than others. It was about a small group of humans defending a mountain pass against an army of thousands. They knew they would die. They fought anyway, not for victory, but for the time their sacrifice would buy for others to escape. Kiraveth read it 3 times. She could not understand why anyone would find such a story inspiring. They lost. They all died. What was the point? But something about it stayed with her. Something about the way humans valued the fight itself, not just the outcome. It was alien to her in ways she could not fully grasp. More gifts followed. Music from 100 human cultures. Foods prepared by the ship's cook with careful attention to Sylphani dietary needs. Flowers grown in the ship's botanical garden, chosen because their colors matched the sunsets of her homeworld. Each gift came with a simple note. Never demanding. Never expecting anything in return. Kiraveth's handmaiden, Thesa, was the one who finally provided some answers. "The crew speaks of him," Thesa reported one morning, her voice low. "They respect him, my lady, but they also worry about him. He does not sleep in his quarters. He stays on the bridge, sometimes for days at a time. When he does sleep, it is in his command chair." "Why?" Kiraveth asked. Thesa hesitated. "They say he has nightmares, my lady. They say he screams the names of the dead." That night, Kiraveth could not focus on her reading. She kept thinking about what Thesa had told her. The Butcher of Nexion Prime, the monster from the propaganda videos, had nightmares about his victims. He screamed their names in his sleep. What kind of monster did that? Her curiosity finally won over her caution. She left her quarters for the first time without Lieutenant Chen as an escort, walking through the gray corridors until she found the observation deck. It was a large room with a massive window that looked out at the stars. And there, sitting alone in the darkness, was Marcus Cole. He did not notice her at first. He was staring at the stars with an expression she recognized. It was the expression of someone looking for answers that would never come. "Commander," she said. He turned, surprised. For a moment, something like hope flickered across his face before he controlled it. "Lady Kiraveth, is something wrong? Do you need something?" "I need answers," she said. "Why do you treat me this way? Why the gifts? Why the distance? The treaty gives you the right to do whatever you want with me. My people would not blame you for taking what is legally yours." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "I know what the treaty says. I helped write it." He turned back to the stars. "But just because something is legal doesn't make it right. You didn't choose this marriage. You were sold into it like property, and I was part of the sale. The least I can do is not make it worse than it already is. But why do you care?" Kiraveth pressed. "I am your enemy. My people killed millions of yours. And I killed millions of yours. Marcus's voice broke slightly on the words. 4,237,812. That's how many people died on Nexion Prime. I know the exact number because I made myself memorize it. Every single one of them is on my soul. Kiraveth felt something shift inside her. You remember the number. I remember all the numbers. Every battle, every bombardment, every ship I destroyed. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were wet. I'm good at my job, Lady Kiraveth. I'm very, very good at killing people. And I hate myself for it every single day. She did not know what to say. The monster from her nightmares was sitting in front of her, crying in the starlight, and she did not know what to say. The books, she said finally. You gave me that story about the warriors in the mountain pass. Why? Marcus wiped his eyes, embarrassed. Thermopylae. I don't know. I suppose I thought you might understand something about humans from it. About why we are the way we are. I did not understand it, Kiraveth admitted. They lost. They all died. Yes. Marcus nodded. But they chose to die. They chose to stand when running would have been smarter. They chose to fight for something bigger than themselves. He paused. That's what humans are, Lady Kiraveth. We're small and weak, and we don't live very long. But we're stubborn. We don't know when to quit. Sometimes that makes us monsters. Sometimes it makes us heroes. Often it's both at the same time. Kiraveth sat down beside him, keeping careful distance between them. Which are you? I don't know anymore, he admitted. I used to think I was fighting for something good. Now I just want to stop hurting people. I want to do something that doesn't end with more names to memorize. They sat in silence for a while, two enemies sharing the starlight. The flowers you sent, Kiraveth said eventually. They were the exact colors of a Silthani sunset. How did you know? Marcus smiled slightly. I spent 2 years studying your culture before the war. I thought if I understood your people, I could find a way to make peace. Instead, I just got better at killing you. The smile faded. Maybe now I can use that knowledge for something better. Kiraveth looked at him with new eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. Perhaps you can, she said quietly. Perhaps we both can. Concordia Station was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It hung in the void between stars like a jewel made of light and metal, home to 1 million permanent residents and countless visitors from every corner of civilization. Today, it was host to the most watched event in galactic history, the formal wedding ceremony of Commander Marcus Cole and Lady Kiraveth of the Silthani Dominion. The treaty signing had been legal and binding, but it had been cold and political. This ceremony was meant to be something else, a symbol of the new peace, a celebration of the end of war. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered to witness it, and trillions more were watching through broadcast screens across the galaxy. Kiraveth stood in the ceremonial hall, dressed in robes that blended human and Silthani traditions. Beside her, Marcus wore his formal military uniform, every medal and honor he had tried to refuse pinned to his chest by direct order of the United Earth government. He looked deeply uncomfortable. She reached over and squeezed his hand. He looked at her with surprise, then with a small, grateful smile. How strange, she thought, that such a simple gesture could mean so much. The Silthani delegation sat in the front rows, led by Kiraveth's mother, the High Matriarch. Their faces were carefully blank, but Kiraveth could feel their emotions through her. Telepathic connection, anger, shame, resentment. They saw this ceremony as a humiliation, the final proof of their defeat. What they did not know What no one knew except Kiroveth and Marcus was what came next. The ceremony proceeded through its formal stages. Words were spoken in a dozen languages. Rituals were performed from both cultures, carefully chosen to offend no one. The whole galaxy held its breath as two former enemies were bound together in a union that was supposed to symbolize hope. And then came the moment that would change everything. The Efficient, an ancient being from a neutral species, raised all four of its hands. In accordance with tradition, the partners may now exchange gifts to symbolize their commitment to this union. Commander Cole, do you have a gift for your bride? Marcus stepped forward. His hand was trembling slightly as he pulled a small data chip from his pocket. I do, he said. His voice was steady, but Kiroveth could see the tension in his shoulders. Whatever he was about to do, he was terrified. Not of the act itself, she realized, but of how she might react. She had no idea what he was planning. He had not told her. He had only asked her to trust him. Marcus activated the chip, and holographic displays exploded into existence throughout the chamber. Documents, treaties, maps, numbers that made no sense at first, until the translators caught up and the crowd began to gasp. For my bride, Marcus announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. I offer a wedding gift. The holographic displays showed legal documents bearing the seals of the United Earth Government and the Galactic Council. They showed star maps with territories clearly marked. They showed bank transfer authorizations with numbers so large they seemed unreal. The complete withdrawal of all human military forces from the outer Silthani territories, effective immediately. Full restoration of Silthani sovereignty over the disputed Varix cluster. The return of every cultural artifact seized during the war, to be transported to Silthanos within 1 standard year. The crowd erupted in noise. Kiroveth heard her mother make a sound she had never heard before, something between shock and disbelief. But Marcus was not done. The establishment of the Nexion Prime Memorial Fund, he continued, with an initial deposit of 2 trillion credits, to be administered entirely by the Silthani government for the benefit of families affected by the tragedy. Additional funds will be added annually from human military budget reductions. Kiroveth's heart stopped. 2 trillion credits. It was a fortune beyond imagining. It was more money than many species generated in a century, and he was giving it all away. For her, several human admirals in the audience were on their feet, their faces red with rage. These were concessions they had fought against for years. Strategic positions surrendered, resources abandoned, money that could have funded new fleets now flowing to a former enemy. These terms have already been ratified by the Galactic Council and the United Earth Parliament, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos. They cannot be revoked or modified. Consider this my personal wedding gift to my bride and her people. The noise in the chamber was deafening. But Marcus turned away from the crowd, turned to face Kiroveth, and suddenly the only thing she could see was him. I couldn't give you back your freedom, he said quietly, for her ears alone. The treaty requires our marriage to continue, but I could give your people back theirs. I could give them back some of what I took. Kiroveth felt tears forming in her eyes. Silver tears, as was the way of her species. How? She whispered. How did you do this? I spent 10 years building political capital, Marcus said. Every favor I ever earned, every ally I ever made, every debt anyone ever owed me. I called them all in. I threatened. I bargained. I begged. He swallowed. I told them that if they didn't give me this, I would go public with everything. Every secret, every hidden deal, every war crime that got swept under the rug. They had to choose between embarrassment and doing the right thing. You destroyed yourself for this, Kiroveth realized. Your career, your reputation, your future. You sacrificed everything." Marcus smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she had ever seen on his face. "I told you once that I wanted to do something good. Something that didn't end with death." He reached up and gently touched her face, wiping away a silver tear. "I hope this is a good start." The hall was still in chaos around them. The Sylphani delegation was weeping with joy and shock. The human admirals were screaming about treason. Every camera in the galaxy was pointed at them. And Kiriveth did not care about any of it. She grabbed Marcus by the front of his uniform, pulled him close, and kissed him in front of the entire galaxy. It was not a kiss of duty or treaty or politics. It was a kiss of choice. And that made all the difference. The galaxy did not know what to make of Marcus Cole. In the weeks following the ceremony, opinions divided sharply. Half of humanity called him a traitor, a fool who had given away hard-won victories for the sake of an alien woman. They burned his image in the streets of Earth. They demanded he be stripped of his rank and thrown in prison. Political commentators spoke of weakness and surrender, of a once great warrior brought low by sentiment. The other half called him a hero of peace, a man brave enough to sacrifice everything for reconciliation. They organized parades in his honor. They named children after him. They held him up as proof that humanity could be more than just conquerors and killers. The Sylphani were equally confused. Their language had no word for what Marcus had done. Enemy, yes. Ally, yes. Conqueror, tribute giver, war criminal. But there was no word for an enemy who surrendered everything without being forced, who gave gifts without expecting payment, who damaged himself to help those he had once destroyed. They invented a new word. It translated roughly as the one who bleeds for peace. Kiriveth found Marcus in their quarters on Concordia Station 3 days after the ceremony. He was packing a small bag with quiet efficiency, folding clothes with the precision of a man who had learned to live out of military vessels. "What are you doing?" she asked. He did not look up. "Leaving." The word hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "The treaty required a marriage," Marcus said. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man trying very hard not to feel anything. "You fulfilled your obligation. The political situation has changed enough now that it won't matter if I disappear. The peace will hold. Your people have what they need. And what about what I need?" Now he looked up, confusion written across his face. "You never wanted this. You never wanted me. You were forced into this marriage against your will, and I was the one who benefited from that force. The least I can do is remove myself from the equation." Kiriveth crossed the room in 3 quick steps and grabbed his arm. "You foolish, stubborn, impossible human," she said. "You just gave away everything you had for my people. You destroyed your career, your reputation, your entire future. And now you're going to leave me?" "I'm releasing you," Marcus said. "You're free now. You can go back to your homeworld. Find someone who didn't kill 4 million of your people. Someone you can actually love instead of someone you were sold to like property. And if I don't want that?" Marcus stared at her. For a moment, hope flickered in his eyes before he crushed it down. "Don't," he said roughly. "Don't pretend. You don't have to pretend anymore." Kiriveth made a decision. She reached up and placed her hand flat against his chest, directly over his heart. It was a Sylphani gesture of profound intimacy, one that opened a full telepathic connection between two beings. She had never used it with him before. "What are you?" Marcus started. And then the connection opened, and she let him feel everything. Every moment of fear from those first weeks on his ship. Every moment of confusion as he defied her expectations. The slow crumbling of her walls as he proved himself again and again. The warmth that had grown in her hearts without permission. The terror she had felt when she realized she was falling in love with him. The joy, the impossible joy, When he had given his gift and she understood the depth of what he felt for her in return, she felt him. Really felt him, without the static that usually blocked human minds from her perception. She felt guilt vast as oceans, the weight of every death he had ever caused pressing down on him without mercy. She felt self-hatred so intense it made her gasp. She felt the conviction, deep and unshakable, that he did not deserve happiness or love or forgiveness. But beneath all of that, burning like a star in the darkness, she felt love. Love for her, pure and unconditional and terrifying in its intensity. Love that asked for nothing in return. Love that would have been content just to know she was happy, even if that happiness was with someone else. This was what humans were, she realized. This was why the galaxy feared them. Not their weapons or their stubbornness or their refusal to accept defeat. It was this capacity for feeling that burned so bright it could destroy everything around it. This love that could move mountains and tear apart empires and reshape the very fabric of civilization. They were terrifying. They were beautiful. They were everything she had never known she wanted. "You wonderful fool," she whispered. "You were planning to walk away. You were planning to give me up just like you gave up everything else, because you thought it would make me happy, wouldn't it?" Marcus's voice was barely audible. Kiraveth laughed. It was not a sound she made often, and it surprised them both. "No," she said. "No, it would not. Because somewhere in the past months, against all reason and logic and sanity, I fell in love with you, Marcus Cole. I fell in love with the man who sends me books and flowers. I fell in love with the man who weeps for the dead and refuses to forgive himself. I fell in love with the man who burned his whole world down just to make mine a little brighter." She pulled him close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. "I don't want to be released," she said. "I don't want to go back to my homeworld and find someone else. I want you. I choose you. Not because of the treaty, not because of politics, but because you are the only being in this entire galaxy who has ever truly seen me as something more than a princess or a prize." Marcus made a sound that might have been a sob. His arms came around her, and he held her like she was the only real thing in the universe. "I don't deserve this," he whispered into her hair. "Perhaps not," Kiraveth agreed. "But I do. And I deserve a husband who will actually stay with me instead of running away out of some misguided sense of nobility." For a long moment, they simply held each other. Two former enemies, two broken people, finding something whole in each other. Then Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the first one she had ever heard from him. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll stay." "Good," Kiraveth said firmly. "Now unpack that bag. We have a piece to build and a galaxy to confuse. And I expect you to be at my side for every single moment of it." Marcus smiled at her, and this time there was no pain in it. Only joy, pure and simple and long overdue. "Yes, my lady," he said. "Whatever you command." Years later, when historians wrote about the human Silthani peace, they always returned to the same image. It was a photograph taken on the day of the formal ceremony, a single frozen moment that had come to symbolize everything the galaxy believed about the new age. In the photograph, Kiraveth and Marcus stood together on a balcony overlooking the Concordia Station promenade. Below them, thousands of beings from hundreds of species celebrated the peace. Above them, stars shone in the eternal darkness. They were not looking at the crowd or the stars. They were looking at each other, and even in a still image, the love between them was obvious. Two people who had every reason to be enemies, who had found something stronger than hatred. When people asked Kiraveth about humans, about what made them different from other species, she always gave the same answer. "They are young," she would say. "They are often foolish. They fight wars they should not fight and make mistakes that wiser races learned to avoid long ago. Then she would smile, and her silver eyes would find Marcus across whatever room they shared. But when a human truly loves, they will tear apart empires for you. They will burn their own legacy to nothing if it brings you peace. They will give you everything they have and ask for nothing in return, and they will call it a privilege. She would pause, letting her words sink in. That is what makes them terrifying, she would conclude. And that is what makes them wonderful. That is what makes them human. And somewhere in the crowd, Marcus would catch her eye and smile. Not the smile of a war hero or a political symbol or the butcher of Nexion Prime. Just the smile of a man who had finally found something worth living for done. Just the smile of a man who was loved.